landscape in the battlefields dramatically changing. If you look at the news from Ukraine or in the Middle East, I mean, you hear very often about UAVs or armed drones. It has basically become a weapon of choice. The most common ones are UAVs, uncrewed aerial vehicles. And they come in different shapes, sizes, and forms. The small ones, very simple ones that you can basically pick up from your local toy shop, to very sophisticated UAVs that are developed and produced for military purposes. And that is a dramatic sort of changes in the way in which the war and conflicts are fought.
The nature of warfare for the major powers who have been investing in weapon systems has been increasingly remote, right? Greater distance from the battlefield, but still with human control over the identification, the selection, and the firing on targets. If those functions are no longer ones that are undertaken by humans, but are undertaken by machines, it raises a whole host of questions, not least are the current laws of war fit for purpose because they were written for humans and not for machines.
The development of technologies like autonomous weapon systems will make it very easy for people to go to war. These systems, once activated, have the ability to go and search, select, target an individual. These systems can be able to make decisions about who lives or die without any further human intervention or control. You can end up not being able, number one, to tell who deployed these systems to begin with. Even if you knew where they were coming from, we may end up with a crime. We may end up with a wrongful act that has been done, but with no soul to blame. Where you can say, who did this to me? And someone will say, actually, no one did. It was the machine.
When autonomy means that once you actually switch it on, then the machines actually are fully delegated with the decision-making power to target and trigger the lethal force and use the lethal force, then it gets really in a blurring, a very difficult area of who is accountable, who is responsible.
I think our experience of technology is that it's imperfect and that it makes mistakes, and we're willing to, tolerate that in the civilian world of our daily lives. But when it comes to the battlefield, a mistake can mean life or death, and it's very easy for machines to mistake targets. We're very concerned about autonomous weapon systems targeting people and using sensor technology to do that. The AI is still flawed. And yet we're starting to incorporate it into weapon systems, and to incorporate it now when it's still not functioning properly and when it brings with it the biases of the people who were programming those systems, it could end up with disastrous results for humanity.
Machines making a decision to take human life is just simply morally repugnant, and it should not be allowed. It should be, in fact, banned by international law. That's the United Nations position. So autonomy, especially attached to UAVs, is a really source of concern.
In terms of international humanitarian law, you are only authorized to target and kill people who are directly participating in hostilities or who are members of a certain state armed force. And I would say you can precisely target a wrong target. So the question is, can these systems be able to lawfully identify legitimate targets.
In a conflict area where things are rapidly changing, where it's completely unpredictable, I doubt that a machine would be able to make the decisions needed to spare civilians, and that they could actually really also make a legal analysis of who is a combatant and who is a civilian in a very short time frame.
When it comes to use of force, especially lethal force, the international law framework is based on the human accountability. So you can't hold the machines or the AI or algorithms accountable. We do have the existing international humanitarian law, and those humanitarian law doesn't apply to just specific categories of weapons. Whatever the weapon systems that you're using, the number one rule is to protect civilians, non-combatants. And this is something that we absolutely have to maintain, but also I would say strengthen. We need to make sure that it will be fully implemented.
We think that explicit new international rules are needed to tackle autonomous weapon systems and to give the world a home or a framework for dealing with the problems which are going to be raised in the years to come. Currently, there is no international framework to deal with autonomous weapon systems, and one is urgently needed, and not just in the next couple of decades, but the next couple of years.
Left unregulated, uncontrolled, then I'm sure it will become an existential question. We are still at the beginning of the AI use in weapon systems, and that's why the discussions and negotiations really require urgency. Before these things actually become the weapon of choice, fully autonomous weapons, no human oversight, no human accountability, we need to make sure that we prevent that sort of a quite unpredictable impact on human race.